Oh yeah, sexy biscuits. Nice.
Long boys blues, 1975. A YouTuber's on the rise. Reviewing games, and sometimes friends. But Long boys blues, 1975.
Hey YouTube, Long Boys Post 1975. What I want to talk about today, I want to talk about the NES, or I guess to the rest of the world, the Nintendo Entertainment System, or NES. But to me, and pretty much everyone in this country, by all means correct me if this is just me and my mates, the NES. A lot of people have asked me from time to time what my memories are of, or experiences, or love of nostalgia, such things like that, are for the NES, because I primarily talk about, when I talk about my gaming history, my love of obviously the Spectrum, Master System, and Mega Drive. And while I own an NES now, I own two. They're both sadly PAL machines. I cut the leg off the chip so you can play, NTSC games on them. They just sadly run at 50 hertz. I own a NES Classic, which is modded, and I own a plethora, word of the day, plethora of Chinese knockoff systems of varying degrees of quality, and pretty much every single one of them has, NES or Famicom emulation on it, and obviously a bunch of them are just NES on the chips or Fami clones. But just because you don't own a system does not certainly mean you don't have a massive amount of nostalgia attached to it. Take me, I have a massive amount of nostalgia attached to the Commodore 64. Never had one as a kid. Knew one person who had one and played it for 15 minutes when I went around his house as a kid for tea after school. But obviously as an adult I have a massive amount of nostalgia for it, despite the fact that basically my childhood of it was defending my beloved ZX Spectrum against it and rubbishing it in playground wars. And it's funny, slight tangent, if you look at my Commodore 64 and ZX Spectrum comparison videos, more often than not, if I side on the side of, awkward phrase, the ZX Spectrum in which game is the better, I still get people who say, typical fucking Spectrum fanboy. I mean, we're grown adults and people still get butthurt on, well of course they do, it's the internet, butthurt over an opinion when it comes to stuff like, which machine is better, which was the better version of the game. Apparently adulthood doesn't exist when it comes to video games. But obviously I have a massive amount of nostalgia for the Commodore 64. I now have a C64 Mini. And since I've found a USB pad that works on it, oh my god, it's freed up fantastically. And I can actually play games without using that god-awful joystick. But this isn't about that. I have a massive amount of nostalgia for the Sega Saturn. My brother had one. I have nostalgia for the Amiga and the Atari ST. My other brother had them in subsequent order. But what I want to talk about here is like my experience of the NES, because I had very, very, very limited access to one, and I went the route of the Sega Master System. But that does not mean through other forms of media, particularly then, obviously, because we're talking, the mid 80s. It was basically magazines. But yeah, it had a massive effect on me, reading about it in magazines and stuff like that. And I'll tell you about, he says at the start of this vlog, if he remembers when he gets to that point, because I do these off the cuff, about how I almost bought one. I can't remember, I think I may have touched upon this a few years ago. Almost bought one over a Mega Drive. I'll explain it, hopefully if I remember, at the last minute. And thankfully didn't. I say thankfully, but this is a video about the NES. I'll go on then, just for you guys. NES. But yeah, so I first became aware of the NES. I first became aware of consoles in general, sort of the the NES, the PC Engine, the Master System, and the Mega Drive, through the tiny, well I say insert, center pages in CVG called Mean Machines, which later on spawned its own magazine. It's the magazine of legend and lore in this country. I still have the first issue. I would say it was my original one, but it's not. SNEStastic gave it to me. But so these instances, I don't know why. I think I just bought CVG one day in the sort of mid 80s, because it was obviously most people know this, if you don't, it was a multi-format magazine, and Mean Machines was a section about consoles, obviously, but that was a side effect of me buying it for another reason. I bought it because it was a multi-format magazine, and generally bought it because of the cover art, which was absolutely fantastic. And it was thanks to that I became aware of consoles coming back. Now, I was aware of the Atari 2600. Our neighbour had one and lent it to us. We were ickle kids. And later on, when I had a Mega Drive, I would borrow one off my mate Elmer at school, and we took it to our holiday chalet because I was genuinely interested to play it. But I never actually physically had one, but I was aware of it and was aware of cartridge systems, even though obviously around about the same time we got our Spectrum and that became our gaming sort of, mainstream. But I didn't really know about ColecoVision or Intellivision. I didn't really find that out about until I was like, in my early 20s. Seriously, I know. Anyway, so this magazine made, wait, there are cartridges back. Wait, it's instant loading. Wait. Bear with me when I say this phrase. They look like 16-bit, but they're 8-bit. They didn't, but you know what I mean. The leap compared to other 8-bits was phenomenal. They were somewhere in between, and sometimes their games, I'm looking at you, R-Type, shat on the 16-bit versions. I know, controversial opinion, fucking fanboy, apparently. So it was thanks to these little pages in the middle of this magazine that I became aware of the NES, and I was really, really intrigued about it. First of all, what is this thing that looks like a VHS, front loader? I didn't know anything about the history, about the video game crash. Most of us didn't really find out about the video game crash in this country until sort of many adulthood, years later, because it was never a thing over here because of the micros. So I didn't know anything about that, didn't know how phenomenally successful it was in America. I mean, it was released in America, 1985, 1983 in Japan is the Famicom, and then we got it on the 1st of September in 1986. But I was that because there were two versions. There was a Mattel one, and Mattel ballsed it up, so Nintendo took it over and then released it themselves, and I think they have compatibility issues. But it was little reviews in that magazine that I remember, and stuff like, I remember seeing Blaster Master and things like that, and I was genuinely very intrigued. And then I remember seeing it show up in club books, sort of Marshall Ward and sorry, I just had my hair cut, I'm itching like a motherfucker. Club catalogues, like club books like Marshall Ward and Littlewood. You know when you used to pay it off at 32p a week for 28 weeks? So like I remember buying Altered Beast on the Master System, paying it off weekly. I long since sold the fucking game by the time I paid it off. And I remember seeing, I'm sure there was definitely the deluxe Rob one over here, and then there was like a standalone deck itself, and I can't remember the prices, but I remember them being considerably more expensive than the Master System, and I remember the games being considerably more expensive than the Master System. But then my sort of price index for the games was just seeing them on a review, and it would say Mega Man 2, and then it would have a couple of screenshots, the blurb, and then it would say the price, which I'm not going to say now because I can't remember, but I'm sure that affected its popularity in this country, apart from the kind of bots Mattel launched and shit like that. I'm sure it's Mattel. Was it Hasbro? Pretty sure it's Mattel. I'm not an encyclopedia of NES knowledge, so by all means correct me if I'm wrong. But because obviously it was destroyed in this country, pretty much Europe, by the Sega Master System, whether that was a price point with the actual unit, mine was obviously second hand, or the price of the games or other things. Again, by all means correct me if I'm wrong, let me know, I should say, inform me on why it was destroyed over here by the Master System. But yeah, so that's why I kind of don't really have sort of any real value of knowledge about, the price of the games. But anyway, saw it in the club books and stuff like that. Constantly saw, adverts for it in other game magazines like that. I can't recall really seeing TV adverts for it. I'm sure there were, and obviously there later on, like with Game Boy, we had the amazing Rick Mail Zelda adverts. But I really can't recall seeing NES adverts on TV, and this is all why it's fascinating and I have nostalgia for it. Obviously they were the do me a favour, plug me into a Sega adverts. Look them up if you've never heard of them. They were fantastic. I want a drawing magazine, a Sega Pal or something, or the official Sega magazine. Guru Larry found it and sent me the scan of it years ago, and I want to do me a favour, plug me into a Sega sweatshirt that had that on the back and just a little Sega logo there. I wish I knew where it was. I never threw it out. Somewhere in an attic somewhere would be cool. Wouldn't fit me, obviously. But yeah, so don't recall seeing adverts for it on TV. Do remember seeing it in club books and making it into, oh my god, what would that be weekly in a club book? But anyway, the main nostalgia I have for it was, even though I started seeing the Master System in Mean Machines, and that's what, you know, because I was a Sega fanboy in the arcades, I was obsessed with Sega. That's what, you know, made me want a Sega Master System. But you still couldn't avoid seeing the NES, and there was no denying when you saw stuff like the Mario games and things like that, you wish you could play them, but you couldn't. But then, obviously, I would still vehemently defend my Master System when I had it, and then rubbish the NES. Like, oh, look at your color palette, ha 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 ha, look at ours. But yeah, so my first experience playing it, I think I may have seen it in John Lewis or a department store set up with pads, maybe, or maybe I dreamt this or imagined this, I don't know, pads hanging out the front in one of those glass cases so you could see it. That, I mean, obviously, even if I'm in Master System territory at this time, I still would have stopped and been blown away by it, because video games are video games, you know. I never had an Amstrad, but I knew one kid who had an Amstrad, but I still would have loved to have played one. Would have loved to have played a Commodore 64, even though I slagged it off all the time, defended my Spectrum behind the scenes, which I didn't tell these fanboys. I would love to have permanent access, or unlimited access to one, I should say. So when we're talking, so I got my Master System, so the NES was released in the UK in 86. I would have got my Master System in either late 87 or early 88, because I got my Mega Drive in 89. And also, I can't recall, but they must have been in the Virgin Centre, but obviously because I would have made a flock to the Sega games, initially Master System, then obviously Mega Drive, and to some degree Spectrum games as well, and board games, stuff like, who remembers Hero Quest and Space Crusade? Oh, they were amazing. But I generally can't remember seeing games. And that's not me saying they weren't anywhere because it wasn't as popular as the Master System, you know. I didn't look for them, so I don't remember seeing them. I do remember thinking that cardboard cases was fucking stupid, lazy and cheap, even as a kid, because obviously absolutely spoilt for choice with clamshells on the Master System. Master System and Mega Drive cases to this day are still some of my favourite cases ever, because they were fucking bulletproof. You could use them as a stab vest if you want. But yeah, I did recall that, thinking that was an odd choice. You know, cardboard. And even when I had my Super Famicom, right, so I would have been, what, 13, 14, 15, I don't know, 14, 15, something around there. Probably earlier than that. Times blur into one, especially when you're talking about the Japanese release of consoles. But even then I knew to keep the cardboard and keep the manuals and keep them absolutely pristine and lovely. But my first experience of playing the NES was my mate, my best mate's school, Sam. His parents bought him one outright. I had to pay for half of my Master System and get the other half for Christmas. Got one bought outright. Not going to judge. And yeah, he had a couple of games, and so you know, a couple of times, you know, a couple of times a week, once or twice a week, I would get to play on it, and I liked it. I really, really liked it. I have very strong memories of playing Mega Man 2. Not been very good at it, but really, really enjoying it. Playing the original Mario, because obviously packing and stuff like that. He didn't have the light gun. Absolutely loved Mario. I mean, I grew up with Mario in the arcades. And then something else I want to talk about where I have strong nostalgia for, and I don't know if it came out before the NES, at least in this country, is I do remember Play Choice 10s, and do recall, hey, isn't that basically a NES? In an arcade machine where you pump money in and it's timed or something like that. And so I did play Gradius on it. So my first sort of, or strong memories I have of playing Gradius in the arcades is the NES version, and not the actual arcade version by Konami. Although I do remember Western Pier had Nemesis, you know, the other name version of it, by Konami in their arcades, and I played it. But yeah, so you know, I do remember, you know, the Play Choice 10. So that's what I mean about this thing, having nostalgia for it. It's interesting because it was like you had to collate all these little experiences from all over the shop when you didn't have, you know, access to one yourself, and it all builds up sort of your memories, love, nostalgia for this system. And like many people, it wasn't until I got to adulthood where I fully got to embrace it with emulation and stuff like that. And I completely forgot the tangent at the start. I said I got to try and remember later on. Oh well, I'll remember it when I emulate it and think, shit, I didn't get to talk about it. But yeah, and he had Double Dragon 2. And I really liked Double Dragon 2 because I had Double Dragon, and I always used to argue, well, this more accurate to the arcade. I know one's the first game and one's the sequel, but I really did like Double Dragon 2. I thought that was an absolutely fantastic game. I don't remember him having loads and loads and loads of games, but it was fun and it was nice, and we used to argue, you know, back and forth about who had the best system. I had a Mega Drive at this point, but I still would vehemently defend the Master System. And he would just go, Dave, look, it's great, the Master System. Although he was fucking flawed when I showed him R-Type one day when he came around my house. I showed him R-Type and he was just like, yeah, this is fucking amazing. But yeah, he used to argue, look, Dave, the Master System's great and stuff like that. But let's be honest, the Nintendo's just a more playable console. And even as a kid, I was like, what do you mean the Nintendo's a more playable console? On the occasions where it's more playable, it's the software, dumbass. It's not the console. I always found that a chuckle, and still find it a chuckle now. But here's the thing. When I said I had a Mega Drive, and jumping ahead a little bit. Oh, have I remembered what I was going to talk about? Yes, I think I have. Sorry, I do these off the cuff. I actually don't plan them or anything. Just get an idea and I want to talk about it. And I want to talk about the NES. Yeah, so before I got the Mega Drive and I was thinking of upgrading and I was selling Master System stuff like that to fund it and working well, I had 3 part-time jobs and I earned so much money back then, it was insane. And yeah, I remember, I don't know why, I remember when I was pricing up importing one, and the cheapest one I found in the end was £189 with 1 pad on arcade stick, and it was supposed to, you know, this supposed to come with Batman, and it didn't. It came with a note saying, sorry, Batman's out of stock. Here's Rastan Saga 2, because that's a comparable game, isn't it? And we'll send you Batman. And they never did. But when I was looking in the back of magazines, the black and whites and stuff like that, and sometimes it was like 229 quid and shit like this, and I think you could buy a new NES at this point for a pinch over 100 quid. I actually genuinely, and I got loads of the flyers, pamphlets and magazines and stuff, multi-format magazines. I can't remember if there was, when the NES initially came out, there was actually a dedicated magazine. I'm wondering if that wasn't a dedicated magazine to the Super Famicom, or SNES came out, sorry. And you had to rely on multi-format magazines. So, yeah, and was looking at the packs and, you know, and reading reviews and stuff like that. And I was genuinely oohing and ahhing about thinking, oh, fuck it, that's too much money to spend on the Mega Drive, even though I really, really, really want one. Shall I keep my Master System and have a NES as well? That would have been awesome. They would have been great systems to complement each other. I would have basically had the best of that generation. And yeah, I started looking, and I was really down with, obviously I wanted Mario 3, wanted Mario 2, I wanted Gradius because of my, you know, nostalgia for it in the arcades. And I came very, very close to saying fuck it and buying a NES. But kind of hindsight, glad I didn't, because I bought a Japanese Mega Drive and enjoyed the dizzying highs of 60 Hz. Because the PAL NESs, like I said, I've got 2 now and I've cut the leg off the chip. But I mean, even on when you play a PAL game on it, obviously they're not optimized and shit like that. They're slower, noticeably, especially the music. But yeah, in the end I decided, so this is something else I do remember. Do you remember when you always went to the Enemy, Dave? Before you went to the Enemy, after your Mega Drive? And again, that's something that I attach nostalgia to, my memories of the NES. And then obviously when I jumped to Mega Drive, then I jumped to SNES and I jumped to PlayStation. It wasn't until years and years later when I had my first job in IT in 1998, I was in Western. I put this in, what was it? I can't remember now. One of my nostalgic memories of videos when I'm talking about, oh yeah, PCs. I mentioned this in that, in case you're interested. You're probably not, because this is talk of, you know, video games. But I remember being there and we were running Windows 98. Windows 98 second edition is still my favourite version of Windows. I know it wouldn't run shit now. I just have warm fuzzy memories for it because it was the first proper version of Windows that actually fucking worked decently. But my mates there, they were all into the early days of emulation, and we used to install it on our work machines, and then later on they gave me a machine to bring home, a 486DX, and we just had internet, so there was internet on that, so I download ROMs, and yeah, oh Nintendo, and you fucking, how badly or harshly they police the ROM world, which you could argue it's their IP, apart from when it turned out that their version of Mario for the Virtual Console was one that they downloaded from a ROM site. even though it was in the head of the file or something, even though you could argue it was their game originally anyway. But yeah, I used to download them, install them on there, take them to work as well, and Nesticle. You know where it ran in DOS and you had the disembodied hand float? I'm pretty sure it's Nesticle floating around like that. And that's when all of a sudden I gained a new appreciation and love, and got to live out the stuff I never did properly as a childhood. And at lunch and at night, used to cane. Had to play it on keys, but you got to remember, looking at someone who grew up on the ZX Spectrum keys, no Q up, A down, O left, P right, M far, Z alternative far. It was, you know, it was absolutely no problem. It tailor-made. You could play NES games on a keyboard was absolutely fine. Apart from if you had to do special moves. Not many games you have to do special moves on it. But, you know, for stuff like Mario and things like that, and DuckTales, I sank so much of my life into DuckTales in my lunch break and at home. And the fact that, you know, it was a discontinued system for many years at this point, and thanks to the internet, I start to realise what impact it had around the globe, such as Japan and North America. They intrigued me, and there was, you know, increased the attraction and interest I would have to the system. But yeah, I got to cane all these games, and they weren't 40 quid, and you could get a shit ton of them on a floppy. Cane all these games that I missed out on as a child, and it was kind of like that was my NES era. That was, you know, where my true love of the console grew. And obviously I wouldn't have a YouTube channel for 13 years, and the start of a YouTube channel is essentially when I got massively back into retro, hence, you know, collecting my Mega Drive games I had as a kid, which spawned me getting into all these other systems, because I would have got my first actual NES console as an adult in probably around 2012, 2013, first couple of years of this channel. So this whole period of playing Emulation, it's probably why I've always defended Emulation. It doesn't quite have such a stigma now, but it's sort of 10 years ago, you know, there was this whole, it was a dirty word. I did vlogs on it. It was a dirty word, emulation. Look at you emulating something. Please wash your hands before you enter my house. But yeah, I really love this experience of emulating, and Nesticle ran absolutely fantastically, as I recall. I wonder if I should try and get it again now, and maybe do some gameplays on it. And obviously, you had save states and stuff like that. Wasn't there one for the Mega Drive called Genesis? CYST? I don't know. Which was also cool, because obviously I didn't have a Mega Drive at that point. And then obviously the birth of my channel and doing gameplays and emulating, and obviously having this, you know, newfound love and appreciation for the NES through Nesticle in those days of emulation, and then buying systems and doing more gameplays and things like that, and now obviously having a small collection, a NES Classic, all these knockoff consoles. I can say that I'm a massive fan of the NES. Obviously, as an adult, despite what happens in my Commodore 64 ZX Spectrum videos, you know, I don't sit there and slate it. They're both equally, you know, impressive systems, the Master System and the NES, you know, for the 8-bit consoles. And would I say one's better? It depends on what you want from your library and what you want when you play games. I personally think the Master System has a better colour palette, but then I have an unlisted gameplay comparison video right now where I can play compared, I'll talk in a minute, Super Off-Road to the NES and the Master System, and came out loving the NES version and thinking the Master System colours look very muddy and orange. But yeah, I mean, I'll still slightly fall on the side of the Master System because of what I had and what I saved up, because, you know, working and saving and stuff like that, it adds nostalgia, you know, to things and things like that. But yeah, as an adult, and I'm glad that ultimately, you know, when I decided to start a YouTube channel to catalogue my experience of recreating, you know, my childhood Mega Drive collection, which ultimately span off into many systems and much money down the toilet. Well, not down the toilet. I'll wash my mouth out for that. Much money spent on a hobby that, you know, brings me a lot of joy and satisfaction. But it was ultimately this hobby and that little period playing Nesticle that kind of brought me into the, you know, a fully appreciative, signed up fanboy, I guess, you know, paid member of the NES Union. So I wanted to talk about this because it kind of got away from me, but let's be honest, these things usually do. But it's funny that, like I said, you didn't have one. And I don't mean you didn't even have one in your house, because let's be honest, when your brothers have consoles, like my older brother had an N64, so, you know, I have nostalgia for that because I could, you know, play it a lot as well as a Saturn. But, you know, when they're in your household, then they're essentially yours, aren't they, unless your brothers are dicks. But the fact that you can have strong memories and nostalgia, and like I said, a collection of little experiences all around because you never physically had one, and that all add into experience that bring you, you know, warm fuzzy memories of a system, and that's kind of my memories of this. Oh, great! This was the speed readers version. I am aware of that. The cliff notes, if you will, of my experiences of my love for and my memories and nostalgia for the NES, a machine now that I simply could not be without. Anyway, as always, I'd love to know what you think, what your experiences were with the NES, and especially other systems, and especially if, like me, you never actually owned them or had true access to them, but you do have a lot of nostalgia for them through other forms of media, and the game TV shows, forgot all about them, and obviously, mediums like magazines and stuff like that. Really, truly would like to know on this one, especially if you have a nostalgia for the NES, but you didn't have one back then and you were a Master System boy or girl. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you later.